I'm Meg.
I'm Drea.
I'm Tina.
I'm Jess.
And this is Pardon My Stash. Welcome to Pardon My Stash, a podcast about knitting and how awesome it is. Before we get into today's topics, let's learn more about our unique cast of characters. Unique is really the right word for it.
Hey, that's not nice.
but true.
Accurate.
So my name is Meg. I'm going to start us off. I am a history teacher, a wife, and a mom to an adorable 2-year-old. I have been knitting for 18 years. Length is no indication of success. It took me many, many years before I even got comfortable doing anything other than garter stitch. So, for people who are knitting and who are still in that phase, it doesn't last forever. I started getting knitting in college when my friend in junior year learned how to knit at home, and she asked all of us in the dorm if we wanted to learn how to knit, and I did. It took me a few weeks to realize that the reason I wasn't getting it was because she was left-handed, and I am right-handed, so I was doing it all backwards. Another reason I really wanted to knit was because my grandmother, who had passed away about 6 months earlier, had been a really prolific knitter. She made tons and tons of Afghans, hats, mittens, and I wanted to follow in her footsteps. I really wanted to knit. I sometimes wonder what she would think about, my knitting at this point. On Instagram, I do have an Insta, and my name is Anahata Knits, Anahata for the 4th chakra, heart chakra. And turn it over to Drea.
Hello. My name is Drea. I started learning how to knit when I was, I believe, in my late teens, maybe early 20s. And Meg here on this podcast taught me how to knit. I was actually a grief knitter. One of my friends had passed away overseas, and Meg gave me a craft to focus on, which really helped me through a lot of things. And I find myself revisiting knitting in various stages of my life as a coping mechanism through a lot of things. I am currently knitting as stroke recovery, so I feel really good about that. Ooh. Lots of progress. I am 33 years old. I have a boyfriend, I have 2 cats, and I am an administrator at an irrigation company in Connecticut. And yarn is life.
That's true.
It's very true.
Yes,
true.
ma'am. All right.
I'm Tina, and I am a web developer, wife, and mom as well. I've been knitting for 15-ish years, and I as well learned from the wonderful Meg, who is sitting.
I don't know if I'd go that
today.
far.
Yes, just the.
I'm just everybody's knitting mom.
Yeah, you are my knitting.
Except for Jess.
I've been pattern designing and test knitting recently, so have a couple hats in the works, have some mitts in the works, all fun stuff. And I also go on Instagram a lot and make a lot of silly reels.
They're great reels.
They are fantastic reels.
And if you want to check them out, my Insta handle is Finarina Knitwear. And how about you, Jess?
Jessica.
My name is Jess. I work in retail. I have some cats and a child.
Some cats.
I have some cats.
And a child.
And a child.
That's amazing.
They are different things as well.
I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that the child
all
and
my
cats
children
are separate.
All my children. But it's an actual child. I've been knitting for 30-ish years, and I actually learned how to crochet first from my grandmother, which I'm pretty sure was a way for her when she was babysitting us to keep me quiet and out of her hair. But which it's actually funny because recently I realized she taught me how to crochet doilies on old beer can pull rings, which I had to look up because I thought maybe it was a fever dream, because I was like, there's no way I learned off of soda tabs. That's not what they looked like. And tabs on cans used to be very different, and she would actually, like, you know, make it so they weren't dangerous for a 6-year-old to be using, but she was holding on to these from the 70s, though, because they stopped making these in, like, 75. She had just a box of rings that she tossed me one, and I'd start crocheting on, so that was interesting. I learned knitting a year or so later. I started learning from my mother, had the same issue as Meg, though. My mother is left-handed, and I could not figure out why I wasn't getting the stitching right. And then my grandmother came along and was like, oh, you just do it like this. And suddenly I magically learned how to knit because I understood the mirror. But I generally knit and crochet crafting objects more than garments. I'm really into doing, like, amigurumi stuff. I don't like things that have a particular pattern because I have trouble with boredom issues.
Trouble?
A lot of trouble.
Just a little trouble?
Just a little bit.
Just a little
Just
struggle.
like a, you know.
How about some stock knit, Jess?
I may have some undiagnosed attention disorders going on, but no. So that is what I do. I do have an Insta, but I'm probably going to be making a new one, so I'm not going to announce it here.
Okay, so that's our cast of characters. We're going to be coming to you from this podcast sporadically, and we're going to start off every session talking a little bit about what we're working on, super brief, you know, talk just a little bit about the project we're on and how it's going. So I'm working on my second test knit. My first test knit was the Seed Dot Beanie by Fienarina Knitwear, Tina's first pattern that's going live in a couple of weeks.
No, less than a week.
Oh, less than a week.
September
Okay.
1st.
September 1st.
Tuesday. Wednesday.
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 So I'm working right now on a test knit for Larks and Whimsies on Instagram. It's called the Feodora Capelet. It's going live in a couple of weeks, mid-September. I have finished the color work on it. It was a really fun project. Unfortunately, right now, I am doing about 5 inches of gray stockinette, which
Good
is,
for you.
oh God, let me tell you, it's worth it because I love how beautiful this is, and I have pictures on my Instagram. I'm gonna be posting it when I'm finished. It's a beautiful, beautiful project. The pattern was fantastic, really easy to read, but this is a lot of stockinette. It's a lot of stockinette. So
That's fair. But the colors look really good. The
It's
blue and the gray.
Yeah, it's a blue and a
color work.
gray. So I
very
love it.
pretty.
So
I'm torn
it's gonna
because
be.
I love it, but I think I'd die.
You would die. I think you'd be fine with the color work, but I think once you got to the stockinette, I think that would be your
I'll
undoing.
hire someone for stock.
You're not hiring me, dear.
I'm available.
Are you, Drea?
Drea?
I feel like I can't screw up stockinette, so yeah, I am available. I am currently working on our last knit along. I have just gotten to the border of the More Simple Lines shawl. I've had, surprisingly, a lot of difficulty with this. But fairly speaking, I did have a very rough July. So I feel like I'm back on track, and it's going to go
Coming
pretty
along great.
smoothly for the rest of it, I hope.
Yes.
You got till October.
I do. We're all going to wear our More Simple Lines shawls to the New England Fiber Festival.
Yeah, that's actually in November. So
Oh,
you got
so
even
even
more
further.
I have
time.
more time.
You have more time.
Yeah.
Yes.
So plenty of time.
So what I'm not working on anything at this moment because I was so excited for our podcast. I completely forgot to pick up a project.
So
But
you came to a knitting podcast and you didn't bring your knitting.
I actually have my knitting.
Would you like to do some courtesy rows of this gray stockinette?
No, I do not want to do.
Do you feel
courtesy
left
row.
out? You can
No,
do
no,
this.
I don't want to do the courtesy.
Nobody
rows.
wants to do this.
No, the project that I'm currently working on a couple of things, pattern designs, finishing up some fingerless mitts, design for that. But the current project I'm working on that I'm actually physically knitting is the Fist cardigan for Ocean Knits, and it's this size 19 needle super large, oversized cardigan.
Sounds
Behemoth.
cozy.
It's very cozy. I'm pretty excited about it. But she's extending into plus sizes, and I'm pretty pumped about that. So, hoping that doing this can encourage others to pick up her patterns and get to it. So, what about you, Jess?
I am currently working on a Loch Ness monster amigurumi for a friend of ours, baby. It's the main pattern is out of the book Unicorns, Dragons, and More by Meteor Books. There's a bunch of different authors in it and a lot of cute little amigurumi. I say little, but this thing is actually a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be.
It's quite large.
Super cute, still child sized, but
Yes,
it's
it is the
pretty
size
big.
of a small
I'm
child.
glad I got
It is the
this
size of
giant
a small child.
ball of yarn because I could have been in trouble otherwise. I've tweaked the pattern a little bit because there are just certain parts that I liked a different look for. But currently, I am fighting with a magic circle that doesn't want to cooperate with me. But once that gets going, it'll go along pretty well, I'm thinking.
Awesome.
Okay, so our first episode today, we're going to talk about how to get into knitting. I'm assuming that most of you who are listening have already gotten into knitting, so this is also a good kind of intro. If you are thinking about showing your friends how to knit or getting a craft circle started, what are some of the basics to getting started? What are the best ways to get started? And what are some of the biggest beginner pitfalls, and how do we avoid them? So if you want to get into knitting, what should we know? What should we know and tell people about how to get into knitting?
Well, first you have to get past the bouncer. There's a knitting bouncer that prevents you from entering said knitting craft into. Okay, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just me.
Do we need
That's
to
a hot tip there.
That's my hot tip.
That's your hot tip.
We need
Okay.
to pass the trials and tribulations before we can pick up the
All
needles.
right. Lesson 1: if you run into a gatekeeper, ignore them.
Yeah.
Stay away from them.
See, I was getting to
There
a point.
are no gatekeepers to knitting.
Meg helped me
Okay.
get to my point.
Cool. I'm glad I helped out. I'm glad I did something.
There is no wrong way to do it so long as you're having fun.
Yeah, it definitely. No, on a serious note, it's very annoying to see certain people present it in a way that you have to immediately know how to do it the right way, or you have to immediately know how to do certain things to be able to get into knitting or crochet or any craft whatsoever. And there's just having that kind of boundary is not going to help anybody get into it. So I definitely think, the bouncer, so to speak, not fun, not allowed,
No.
not wanted.
Literally, the best way to start getting knitting is to find a friend who knits or take a class. Go to a local yarn store and go to an open knit or a stitch and bitch. If you don't know any knitters,
Smaller local yarn stores will usually have some sort
have an
of
open knit session.
knit
And if you're
day.
not comfortable there, or if they are like gatekeepers, leave and go somewhere else.
You're not
There-
obligated to stay.
No,
Yeah.
there are tons of wonderful people that are willing to sit and show you the basics. If somebody makes you feel uncomfortable or, tries to gatekeep or tells you you're doing it, you're doing things wrong and you don't like what you're hearing, you can go someplace where you're more comfortable. So,
Yeah, and there's plenty of different groups out there and in different yarn stores too. So you can definitely pick out what makes more sense for you. I know back before COVID hit, you could really use meetup.com to find local knitting groups around you if you couldn't find it in your local yarn store. But I know even in Connecticut, not naming names, but we have stores that we like and stores that we do not like.
yeah, in a future podcast, we'll be talking about the ones we like.
Yeah. We will
Not
not
the ones we don't like.
those other ones shall not be named. But the ones that we like, for sure, we'll definitely talk about
Give them a
those.
shout out.
But it's true that you kind of have to feel it out and see what's more welcoming, what's more wanting you there, what is more
Comfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
Heck, what
Do you
has what
remember-
you're looking for?
Like,
So sure.
So another thing that I feel like needs to be said is I feel like a lot of people quit early on because they get frustrated that they're not perfect right off the bat. I'm a perfectionist. Drea's a perfectionist. We're both Virgos. We can't help it.
You should see my first scarf.
Oh, nobody's first scarf is good. Mine had a hole in it.
Mine had 2 holes in it, and it was all like wobbly on the edges because I magically picked up stitches and lost stitches as I went along.
You're gonna do that too. Like your first piece of work is gonna be garbage. And Jess, I know you said something earlier about your first project that I think you should throw in there.
Your first project, always start simple. Your best bet is something with a knit purl, a scarf, or a blanket. Nothing with too many increases, decreases. Start with what you're going to end with. Gauge has no meaning. Needle size has no meaning. Yarn weight has no meaning. Your first project, comfort should be your only goal. Learn how you knit, how tight you knit, how loose you knit, or crochet works as well, how the yarn feels, how it looks, what feels right. And once you get through that project, you'll have a better understanding to move forward.
So nothing has any meaning.
Nothing has any meaning.
And that first project, not really.
Yeah, no.
And your goal should not be to have it should be to have a finished project.
I gifted my first project.
Yeah, so did I, and my mother never wore it. Shout out to Mom.
Yeah, hi Mom. Also gave mine to my mom, and she looked at it and was like,
I never finished my first project.
I actually don't think that I still have that first project.
Yeah.
Was it burned?
I believe I kept it from myself, but I think I threw it away at some point during one of my moves.
You were just like, no more.
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's your first piece doesn't need to be like, you don't need to save it even. When you tried teaching Paul how to knit and he just kept pulling it out and restarting. Your goal is just to get comfortable with the muscle memory. It's not to have this fantastic first project. The first time I tried to knit a hat, I started the decreases too early. I decided that since I was knitting a hat on size 9s, but I only had size 4 double points, that wasn't a problem. You may mock me now.
Yes.
When I finished it, it was literally a knitted yarmulke. Like, it really was. And my then boyfriend was hysterical. And to be fair, I thought it was funny too. But I didn't get upset about it because I'm like, okay, I learned some things today, and the next day I bought some more yarn and I bought the right size needles and I made a wearable hat.
Guys,
so
a yarmulke is still a hat.
Right, but wasn't the goal.
You still succeeded.
I still succeed. So anyway, what you should not do is beat yourself up. You should not get upset with yourself for not being perfect. Practice is going to make perfect.
Practice makes perfect. It also, down the line, you'll find you do want to start that project and all you have is the big yarn and the 4 needles and the 1 hat pattern, and you will figure out how to adjust that pattern and make it work.
That might just be you.
I am also a Capricorn, and we make stuff work for us, okay? This is going to work.
You
Because
are
I don't
also-
have time.
You were also very good at jerry-rigging anything that you come across. If it's not working for you, you make it work for you.
Guys, I don't have time to fix it, okay?
Jess
It's
is
just gotta
MacGyver.
fix itself. Look, you got to do what I want you to do because
Definitely when you're buying materials and equipment and everything that you need to get knitting, definitely don't go for the most expensive stuff right away.
Also, don't go for the fun stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would get just a basic, like a worsted, of like a 4-ply or something. I would not start with fun fur or boucle
Mohair.
or mohair.
Silk.
Yeah.
Silk.
honestly, something that's not going to fray easily because
And something that has a little bit of give. I probably wouldn't start on a cotton. Or
knit-
like a linen.
Knit with some wool or a wool acrylic blend. Something that feels good on your hands. You're going to be knitting for this project for a long time. If you are knitting with yarn that is scratchy, you're going to hate your project real fast.
To this day, I still don't buy yarn if it doesn't feel good in my hands.
No, same.
And that being said, acrylic is not bad.
It's-
There is
No.
fantastic acrylic
There are
out there.
ranges of acrylic.
They've got
Yeah.
This
so
ain't
much
your
better.
grandma's acrylic yarn anymore.
It's
Yeah.
not. It's actually, I like a lot of acrylics.
Yeah.
these
My
days.
sister
It's
only
nice.
knits with acrylics. And they're super soft.
Yeah.
Some
There's-
of them are, yeah.
Yeah. Michael's and Joann's have great options. They have
Especially
terrible
when-
options too, but they also have great options.
Well, especially when you're starting out, because they are cheap, and
Yeah.
it's not like because it does happen. You will be pulling out or pulling stitches, and that yarn will start to break down a bit if it's the same yarn all the time. So you want to be aware you may have to be cutting it at some point and picking it back up if it gets too frayed. So you want something that's not $30 for 100 yards.
Well, I've even gotten pretty decent acrylic yarn at Walmart when I was making blankets.
They have really cute mandala yarn
Yeah.
that I
I've
really like.
seen those.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I haven't bought it.
Yeah,
but
it's
I've
really
seen
good for
it.
like baby clothes.
Side note, those of you getting your friends into knitting, and I'm sure you probably have some of this yarn left over that you got at the time when you were learning, but you're not really using anymore. This is a perfect time to gift it to someone else who is learning, so they get free yarn. Don't give them just crap stuff, though, guys. Be a little nice.
Be nice. Don't give them your fun fur.
Be nice. Fun fur may be fun. Honestly, I like working with fun fur depending on the project. They make great little stuffed toys and whatnot. Not a great thing to start with because it is really hard to tell the difference from what is the actual yarn and what is the fuzzy bit sticking off of it.
Yeah,
So
there's no stitch definition.
get something a little bit and don't choose black for your first project, guys.
No.
Hey.
Oh,
Hey,
Hey.
black yarn is great.
girl, you
Black
didn't use
yarn
it for your
is
first project.
not- for a
beautiful,
first
but not for your
It
first
was-
project.
my first shawl was in black.
Was it really?
It was.
But it wasn't your first project.
No.
Fair.
But
Honestly, and it
I
just
really
isn't-
like black yarn.
any dark color yarn as
Yeah.
a first project is not
It's
like
true. You can't see the stitch
can't see
definition
it.
as well as if you have something that it's a little bit lighter. Yeah, I agree.
Or if you're going to start with a dark colored yarn first, get a light colored needle.
Yeah,
to help
yes,
yourself.
Yeah.
that will do
That's
it.
where
you-
that's where
you
the
can do
bamboos come
that.
in handy because they're super light wood and darker yarn shows up on it better.
And we cannot forget to shout out YouTube.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
If you are learning a new skill, YouTube, thousands of videos.
Oh, I use YouTube all the time. Sometimes I use YouTube because I'm doing something like I'm doing a single stitch crochet and I'm like, why does this look weird? And it's just because I've been doing it for a while, but I'll pull up YouTubes and be like, do they crochet the same way I do? Am I doing something wrong for 30 years? It could be.
No, but YouTube's a great resource, and Instagram videos too. I actually
Yeah.
uploaded one the other day about doing a certain stitch because
It was very
couldn't-
informative.
I couldn't figure out YouTube, but it was easier to upload to Instagram. But there's definitely videos out there that will show you specific stitches. You just literally have to, if you look in the pattern you're using and it says knit together, and you're like, what does that mean? Or K2 tog, that's what it would show up as. And you're like, what does that mean? You would just type that into YouTube and there'll be at least 50 videos of people demonstrating it for you in various ways. And obviously there's the two different styles, the continental and the English, and you can have, the videos will show you either way, whatever way that you decide to learn in that aspect.
Well, thank you for that delightful dialogue. So to wrap up this podcast this week, we're going to talk about the biggest mistakes we made when we started knitting. So who would like to start? I've started every single time. So
I decided that I was going to knit a Chanel scarf for my brother. And my yarn broke on that one project about 6 times because there was no give to that yarn. And I was a very, very tight knitter when I started learning how to knit.
I feel like knitting with Chanel is one of those pitfalls that we should have kind of mentioned in the first, that other segment there, that, yeah, it breaks really
Yes.
easily. You need to be working with some big needles to knit with Chanel.
I was
because-
not.
I had the same problem. I think the second scarf I tried to knit, I did the same thing, and I think I broke the yarn about 5 or 6 times before I just said, I'm done, and threw it out and got a new yarn.
It's fair.
It's obnoxious.
For me, I wrote something down, but I'm actually going to disagree with it because I just thought about, honestly, learning on straights when I should have learned in the round. Like on circulars,
yes.
I find even if I'm not making a hat or something circular, circular needles are just so much easier to work on than straights.
They're a lot more manageable. I agree with you.
They're a little bit more flexible. If I'm working on something, like say I'm working on a cardigan body, it's just a lot easier to work all the way around like that, even if it doesn't connect necessarily.
Yes.
It's just easier to do that instead of working on straights. And even if I was doing a swatch the other day and I still pulled out my circulars, I did not. I was like, oh, look at the straights over there. No, I'm not going to do it. Not going to
See, I'm just laughing because you said that you were doing a swatch.
You know, you have to do swatches at some point.
I don't think I've ever done a swatch
Really?
in my life.
Okay, if you ever start doing garments, you have to do a swatch.
I haven't either.
Okay, I'm
Are you
just
serious?
Am I the only person?
no, girl,
Okay, you
I
did
do
swatch.
swatches.
Okay,
I
thank
swatch.
you. Okay, thank you.
I told you I'm a Capricorn, man. The yarn does what I want it to.
like the swatch. Okay, I was very much like pshaw swatches until one time I went to knit a top for myself and I knit it way too large and it was obnoxiously large and I was like, I really should have swatched, and then I would have realized my gauge is way too big, and then yeah, no swatching. Okay, I will
One day.
hats, scarves, cowls, even gloves.
Shawls.
Not necessary. Sweaters,
That's fair.
camis, stuff like
I
that.
will consider it when we do our Rhinebeck sweaters next year.
Oh, fair. Yeah, you'll need to.
It will
'cause
be a consideration.
You'll be very upset if you get all the way to the end and then
Oh,
you
yeah,
realize
girl.
that you messed up.
You might want to do it
sizing.
before we do the Celtic shawl in the winter too, just
The
to make sure.
shawl?
Just to make sure you don't run out of yarn.
Oh, that's fair.
You know?
That's fair.
That's
Tighter
fair. That's
in
fair.
my knitting.
That's fair.
That's true.
That's the reason why I am a loose knitter. So
Super loose.
Very loose.
Listen, Hobag.
I am too.
I know you are,
no,
lady.
I was saying I'm very loose
Literally,
as well.
when I was doing the test knit for your hat and I was knitting it, I'm like, I think Tina might be looser than I am.
Yeah, no, we were both loose.
High
and
five.
then I went to
But we were also the only two that swatch.
That's true.
Apparently.
Because then I went to my group of test knitters afterwards, and all of them were like, "Wow, I really can't meet gauge. What kind of needles did you use?" And I'm like, "Guys, we're just really loose. I'm sorry."
All I
loose
have to say
ladies.
is I didn't run out of yarn though.
You didn't.
Yay.
You did it. That was amazing. I was
Perfect
shocked.
amount. Perfect. Because the yarn did what I wanted it to.
Oh my god. Listen, just for those of you
Beat
that are
that yarn
listening,
into submission.
it's not no. If you were knitting a garment, don't be like Jess.
Yeah,
Or
it's
Drea.
probably the worst. I would have gladly thrown on a last row of a different yarn that would have driven other people nuts because that's how I work. But quick add-on though, quick tip to using circulars instead of straights. If you are worried about maybe the project falling off the end, just get a point protector, put it on the end you're not using at the time, and flip them off every time you switch it, and you don't have to really worry about it when you're not doing something else.
Yeah, and they're literally $2.99 at
Yep.
Joann's or Michael's. Cheap.
Yep. So
It's great.
It's great for when you lose all of them.
Yeah, my kid runs off with them all the time.
Yep.
I must have like 40 in this house.
Candies.
Yeah, she thinks they're candy. Thank God she doesn't eat them.
She
She
doesn't
knows
eat
they're
them?
she knows they're not candies, but she likes to pretend they are. I want to say probably my biggest mistake was not trying anything new for so long. I started knitting when I was 20 years old, and it was 5 years before I attempted to learn a purl stitch. So for 5 years, I did nothing but garter stitch. I did nothing but scarves, which is not a bad thing. I mean, my younger sister, I taught her how to knit. She does 1x1 rib scarves. They're beautiful. She loves to do them. There's nothing wrong if that's your thing. I desperately wanted to be a better knitter, but I got scared. I got intimidated by it. The best thing about knitting is that you can pull it out. If you make a mistake, you can pull it out. You can try again, you can make it perfect. Unless you literally take scissors to your knitting, we'll talk about steeking some other time, you can't ruin it. You can always pull it out. So I kind of am at the point where I recommend once you get past your first project, you should try a hat right away. learn how to do ribbing, learn how to do knit and purl, learn how to do decreases. Because once you get past that first hat, now you've learned how to cast on, to knit, to purl, to switch to larger needles, to do some other stitches, to do decreases, to Kitchener it off, you know.
And to knit in the round.
And knit in the round. And you get out of that rut of not doing anything but garter stitch scarves.
And hats are really fast.
They're so fast.
They're
That's
so
the other
fast.
thing, too, is that garter stitch scarves can be really soul-sucking. They take forever, unless you're knitting with really, really big needles and big, big yarn. They can take months. A hat, like I said earlier with the yarmulke story, I banged out a hat in 48 hours on my second attempt. So, and that was a hat that fit, not a yarmulke. So they're a lot faster, and they give you a bigger rush. Like you feel like you're capable of doing more. And a lot of that tied in, I think, to that perfectionism that we talked about earlier, where I felt like if it wasn't perfect, then it wasn't good enough. And it's not the case. Your first stuff isn't going to be perfect. You should just try to learn as much as you can and get comfortable with as much as you can. So that'd be my biggest mistake. That is about all the time that we have for today. Tune in next week for another rambunctious episode of Laughs, Tears, and Drama at Pardon My Stash.